At her wedding, Lena's daughter shouted, "Go away! Lena's groom doesn't want you here." Lena left without a word, a sharp pain lodged in Lena's chest. The very next day she called and said, "Dad sent us the keys to the beach house. We're going to spend our honeymoon there. Welcome to Dad's revenge. I'm glad you found your way here. If stories like this one speak to you, stay close and follow along so you never miss the next one." Before we go further, are you listening on headphones today or letting it fill the room through a speaker? Either way, I think you'll want to hear every word of this one. A quick note, some details in this story have been shaped for the telling, and any resemblance to real individuals is purely coincidental. It's the truth underneath that matters. Each curve deliberate. The auction house had listed it as exceptional condition, and they weren't exaggerating. I'd paid $12,000 for it, which felt like too much until I pictured Sarah's face lifting the lid of the walnut box. She had always been drawn to old things, objects with history woven into their mechanisms. I wrapped it in the velvet cloth, closed the presentation box, and tucked it into the desk drawer. The wedding was 2 weeks away, 14 days until I walked Clifford's daughter down an aisle at Forsyth Park and placed her hand in Gavin Cresswell's, a man I'd known for 3 months and understood less with every week that went by. The house felt hollowed out, too still. I left the study and moved toward the living room, where Sarah's voice rose and fell in lively conversation. Gavin's lower register punctuated her sentences, agreeable, warm the voice he brought out whenever he needed something. The two of them sat together on the sofa, surrounded by fabric swatches and photographs of flower arrangements. Sarah looked up as I came in her face, carrying the particular glow that belongs to brides-to-be. "Dad, tell Gavin he's wrong about the orchids. They're elegant, not pretentious." Gavin offered me an easy, well-practiced smile. "I'm outnumbered. The orchids stay." I'd set the table earlier, a habit built during the years after Clifford's wife passed. It gave Clifford's hands something to do, arranging silverware with care folding napkins into clean triangles. We gathered in the dining room as the sun sank behind the live oaks, filling the space with amber shadows. The meal began pleasantly enough. Sarah walked through the venue setup, the jazz trio she'd hired, the menu she'd spent weeks wrestling over. Gavin nodded along, asked questions at the right moments, performed the attentive groom. I watched him across the table, tracking how his eyes moved, cataloging, assessing, always turning over some quiet calculation just beneath the surface. "The beach house," he said out of nowhere midway through dessert. Casual, conversational. "That place on the coast, it just sits empty most of the year, doesn't it? Ever think about putting it to work? Vacation rentals are booming right now. I could run the numbers." Clifford's hand tightened around the wine glass. The beach house had been in the family for 40 years. Clifford and his wife had spent summers there. Sarah had learned to swim in that water. "The beach house stays in the family," I said, keeping Clifford's voice measured. "It's not a business asset." Something crossed Gavin's face. The smile stayed fixed, but behind it, his eyes went flat and cold, a mask slipping for half a second before snapping back. "Just trying to help maximize your portfolio," he said, settling back with practiced ease. "You've built something impressive here. Someone ought to make sure it keeps growing." Sarah laughed, oblivious to the current running beneath the exchange. "Gavin's always thinking about investments. Dad, the florist, confirmed the orchids will be perfect. Gavin helped me select the arrangements. I'm sure everything will be beautiful," I said, pushing back from the table. The chair scraped against the hardwood. "Excuse me, I have some work to finish." There was no work. There was only unease coiling in Clifford's chest, tightening with each breath. Back in the study, I settled into the leather chair and stared at the drawer holding the antique watch. The gift felt different now, less like something being offered to Sarah, and more like something Gavin was already circling, biding his time to claim. He'd moved into the house 3 months ago, not long after the engagement. Sarah had asked if they could stay while they looked for a place. I'd agreed because I wanted her close, wanted to get a true read on the man she'd chosen. But Gavin had settled in as if he'd always belonged, his presence quietly expanding to fill corners of the house that had been Clifford's alone for years. The beach house remark hadn't been casual. It had been a probe testing the boundary, measuring how far he could push, and the look he'd fixed on me when I refused. That coldness said everything I needed to hear about what lived beneath the charm. I pulled the drawer open and studied the walnut box again. 2 weeks. Clifford could hold things together for 2 weeks, smile through the ceremony, raise a glass to their future, and then watch them start a life somewhere else, away from this home and everything in it. But even as I reasoned this out, I knew Gavin had no intention of leaving. He'd found something of value here, and men like him didn't walk away from value. I shut the drawer and switched off the desk lamp. The house settled into darkness around me, and I sat there a long while listening to Sarah's laughter travel down the hallway, bright and unguarded, and entirely unaware of what I was beginning to see. The walnut box rested in Clifford's jacket pocket, its weight steadying as I locked the car. I'd checked Clifford's appearance in the rearview mirror, twice, straightened the tie, smoothed the lapels, arranged Clifford's face into an expression of paternal pride. Morning light filtered through the live oaks surrounding the Forsyth Park venue, scattering moving shadows across the walkway. Inside the entrance hall hummed with arriving guests. I recognized faces from the business community, acquaintances from decades of running the antique shop. Bertram Ashford from the auction house gripped Clifford's hand firmly. "Congratulations, Clifford. Sarah's a lucky bride." "Thank you, Bertram." The same exchange repeated as I worked through the crowd. Handshakes, smiles, congratulations. I accepted with practiced ease. Roughly 140 people had been invited, and most of them seemed to have arrived early, filling the elegant space with conversation and laughter. The main reception area spread before me, dressed with those orchids Sarah had championed. White petals spilled from tall arrangements, their elegance impossible to argue with. I touched the box in Clifford's pocket, turning over how I'd present the gift privately before the ceremony, a quiet moment between father and daughter before everything shifted. Sarah stood near the receiving line, with Gavin welcoming early arrivals. She wore an ivory chiffon dress, not the wedding gown, yet something chosen for the pre-ceremony mingling. I made Clifford's way toward them, threading through clusters of guests. She saw me coming. Her expression changed. Something tightened in her face, and she stepped away from the group to intercept me. Her hand closed around Clifford's elbow, not warmly, but firmly steering me away from the others. "Dad." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper, but the tension in it cut through the noise around us. "You need to go. Gavin doesn't want you here. Please just leave." The words didn't land right away. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "What, Sarah? What are you talking about?" Her fingers pressed harder into Clifford's arm. Around us, heads were turning, conversations going quiet. The confrontation was unfolding in plain sight, guests near the gift tables, standing witness to whatever this was becoming. "Just go," she said, sharper now, her face flushed. "Don't ruin this for me, please." Pain struck Clifford's chest sharp, immediate, radiating down the left arm. Angina, the stress triggering the condition Clifford's cardiologist had warned about. Clifford's hand moved on instinct toward the heart, but I caught it, redirected the gesture into adjusting the jacket. I would not show weakness here, not in front of these people, not in front of Gavin, who I could now see watching from across the room, his expression satisfied, gratified like a man surveying something he'd built. This humiliation had been planned, arranged in advance. "I understand," I said quietly, releasing the words with effort. I didn't argue, didn't plead or press for explanations. What would have been the point? Everyone was watching. Bertram Ashford, the Johnsons from 2 streets over, colleagues from Sarah's gallery. I could see them taking it all in, filing it away for later. I walked to the gift table, each step measured, despite the crushing weight in Clifford's chest. The walnut box came out of Clifford's pocket. I set it down among the other wrapped packages, this 12,000 expression of love, reduced to one more anonymous object among many. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. The distance felt immense. Whispers trailed behind me like a current. "Is that her father? Why is he leaving? Something happened." I kept Clifford's head up the pace, steady, refusing to hurry or stumble. The doorway finally came. The parking lot. Clifford's car sitting where I had left it 20 minutes earlier, back when I'd still been a father, arriving to celebrate his daughter's wedding. Inside, the vehicle doors closed and locked. I reached for the small nitroglycerin bottle kept in the console. Clifford's hands shook as I placed the tablet under the tongue. The medication dissolved bitter chemical. I closed my eyes and waited for the pain to ease. Through the windshield, the venue was visible, elegant, expensive, full of people who had just watched Clifford get turned away at the door. Clifford's daughter had chosen Gavin over her father, or Gavin had chosen to make a public show of his authority, and Sarah had gone along with it. The pain in Clifford's chest began to recede, replaced by something no medicine could touch. Clarity. Focus. The hard, clean edge of understanding. Gavin Cresswell had engineered this, the timing, the public setting, the deliberate cruelty of it. A message, a demonstration of control. He'd spent 3 months inside this house, mapping everything of worth, marking what he intended to take. And now, he'd cut me out, cleared the obstacle from his path, moved to claim it all. But he'd made a mistake. He'd assumed I would accept this slink away in shame, and let him have everything. I sat in that car, hand still pressed against Clifford's chest, and felt something fundamental shift inside. The wounded father was still there, grief-stricken at what had been taken from him. But something else rose up beside it. Colder, harder, patient. Gavin Cresswell had declared war. He just didn't know yet that I understood the battlefield. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the venue and its witnesses behind. But this wasn't retreat. This was regrouping. And tomorrow, when Sarah inevitably called, asking for something, the beach house keys, perhaps for the honeymoon, I'd start learning exactly who Gavin Cresswell really was. The game had changed. Now it was Clifford's turn to move. The walnut box sat on the desk where I'd set it hours before. The antique watch inside, returned from the gift table by some well-meaning guest who'd tracked down Clifford's address, mocked me with its perfection. 12,000 worth of craftsmanship that had never reached Clifford's daughter's hands. I'd been sitting there since coming home from the wedding, watching dawn break through the study windows, Clifford's chest still tight with residual pain from yesterday's angina attack. Sleep hadn't come. The scene kept playing back Sarah's tense whisper, the watching guests Gavin's satisfied expression from across the room, the deliberate cruelty of it. When the phone rang mid-morning, I stared at the screen through 3 rings before answering. Sarah's name glowed there, insistent. "Dad, we want to use the beach house for our honeymoon. Can you send me the keys? Gavin says the coast would be perfect this time of year." Her voice was bright, rushed full of newlywed energy. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened the day before. Just a request for Clifford's property delivered as casually as asking for sugar with coffee. I said nothing. Silence stretched between us, broken only by Clifford's breathing and the faint sound of traffic on her end. "Dad, are you there?" The beach house. I kept Clifford's voice carefully level. "For your honeymoon." "Yes. Is that a problem we'd leave this Friday?" "Friday. 5 days away." Gavin wanted immediate access to the coastal property, the place Sarah's mother and I had built together, where summers had been spent, watching Sarah learn to swim. "I'll need to prepare it first," I said, each word measured. "The systems haven't been checked since winter. Give me a week." A week. Disappointment came through clearly. "I guess that's fine. Just let me know when it's ready." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat holding the phone, staring at the blank screen, feeling something cold and clear settle in Clifford's chest. This had nothing to do with romance or honeymoons. Gavin was already moving on the assets, sizing up value, gauging what he could claim. Yesterday's humiliation had been the opening move. Today's request was the follow-through. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out Clifford's leather address book, the one maintained across 40 years of business contacts. I turned pages until I found Harwick Neville's personal number. Harwick managed the Kehoe house and had once mentioned over drinks at a charity auction that he knew people who could handle delicate matters with discretion. He picked up on the second ring. "Harwick, it's Clifford Hargrove. I need a favor." "Clifford." His voice carried immediate concern. "I heard something happened at your daughter's wedding. Are you all right? What exactly do you need, Clifford?" I leaned back in the chair, choosing each word carefully. Someone who can look into a person's background thoroughly discreetly. A pause then. "I know someone, former police now private, Remy Duchamp. He's reliable. Can you send me his contact information? Give me 10 minutes. Another pause. "Clifford, be careful with this." "I will." The text arrived 8 minutes later. Remy Duchamp, Broughton Street, address, phone number. I looked at the information on the screen, feeling the first stirring of something that had gone quiet since Saturday. Not hope exactly. Purpose. I spent Sunday placing the call and setting the appointment for Monday morning. The hours passed with unbearable slowness, but I used them well. I wrote down everything known about Gavin, his arrival in Sarah's life 6 months ago. The rapid engagement, the move into Clifford's home, the offhand questions about the property's Saturday's orchestrated humiliation, Sunday's audacious demand. Patterns emerged when laid side by side. Gavin wasn't impulsive. Every move had been calculated, each step designed to bring him closer to Clifford's assets while cutting me off from Clifford's daughter. Monday morning arrived at last. I dressed with care, selecting a suit that projected competence and steadiness. Remy Duchamp needed to see a serious client, not a desperate father grasping at vindication. I rang Sarah before leaving. "The beach house will be ready in a week," I told her. "I need to check all the systems properly, safety first." She sighed but agreed. "Gavin won't be happy about the delay." "I'm sure Gavin will manage," I said, and ended the call. In Clifford's hand was the notepad with Remy Duchamp's information, the first concrete step toward understanding what was actually being faced, the first tool in a counterattack still taking shape. I picked up the phone and dialed. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Duchamp, Mr. Duchamp, the name is Clifford Hargrove. Harwick Neville gave me your contact information. I need to hire an investigator. I have time Monday morning, 9 o'clock Broughton Street." He gave me the address. "I'll be there," I said. After hanging up, I sat a moment longer in the study, looking at the walnut box and the watch inside the rejected gift. Then I stood, straightened Clifford's tie, and prepared to take the first active step in a contest I hadn't chosen, but refused to lose. The building on Broughton Street was modest, red brick, narrow windows, the kind of place that housed accountants and insurance agents. I found parking at a meter, fed at quarters, and stood on the sidewalk a moment to collect myself before going in. Remy Duchamp's office occupied the second floor. I climbed the stairs slowly, Clifford's chest offering a quiet reminder of Saturday's angina attack with each step. A door at the landing bore simple lettering, L, Duchamp Private Investigations. I knocked, a voice called, "It's open." The office matched the building, functional, no pretense. A cluttered desk filled the space, buried under file folders, a computer monitor, and stacks of papers held down by a coffee mug. Behind it sat a man in his early 50s, gray threading through dark hair, eyes that took full measure of me in the 3 seconds it took to cross the threshold. Clifford Hargrove. I extended Clifford's hand. His grip was firm, professional. "Remy Duchamp, have a seat." I settled into the chair across from him and placed Clifford's business card on the desk between us. He glanced at it, establishing credibility. I understood. Antique shop owner, legitimate businessman, not someone chasing shadows. "What exactly do you need to know about this man?" he asked, getting straight to it. I appreciated the directness. Everything. Previous marriages, financial standing, criminal history, current associations. I need to know who Clifford's daughter married. Remy picked up a legal pad and began making notes. Name Gavin Cresswell, 38 years old, real estate agent, claims to work for Pinnacle Realty downtown. I provided the details methodically. Gavin's arrival 6 months ago, the whirlwind courtship, the move into Clifford's home 3 months back, the questions about the properties dressed up as casual conversation. "The wedding was Saturday," I continued. "Clifford's daughter asked me to leave before the ceremony. Her exact words were, 'Gavin doesn't want you here.' Sunday morning, she called asking for the keys to the beach house. No apology, no explanation, just a demand for property access." Remy's pen kept moving steadily. "Previous marriages?" he asked without looking up. "I don't know, that's why I'm here." "Financial situation? Claims to be successful, drives a leased Audi, wears expensive clothes, but there's never been any evidence of real assets." "Any threats made?" I paused, turning it over. "Nothing direct, but his brother Dorian Cresswell, supposedly a lawyer, has been mentioned this week. Sarah called yesterday saying Dorian could optimize Clifford's property taxes if I'd agree to meet with him." Remy's pen stopped. He looked up. "Introducing a lawyer this soon after the wedding. That's interesting. That's a comprehensive background check," he said, setting the pen down. "Takes time, 2 weeks minimum, maybe longer, depending on what I find." "Money isn't the issue," I said. "Thoroughness is. Can you do it?" He studied me a moment, then nodded. "I can do it. 2,500 retainer, 175 per hour plus expenses. You'll get detailed written reports, nothing verbal documentation for everything I find." I pulled out the checkbook, wrote the amount without hesitation, tore the check free, and slid it across the desk. His fingers were already reaching for it before the motion was finished. "You'll hear from me within 2 weeks, he said. "Sooner if something urgent turns up." We shook hands. I left with his card in Clifford's pocket and the first faint warmth of something resembling hope in Clifford's chest. The week that followed tested patience and resolve in equal measure. Gavin escalated the pressure campaign through Sarah, using her as his instrument without her recognizing it. Wednesday she called about beach house documents. Gavin wants to know about the property deed for insurance purposes, he says. Clifford's coverage is up to date, I said, holding Clifford's tone flat. Thursday delivered another call. Dad Gavin's brother Dorian could really help with the taxes. No charge for the first meeting. Clifford already has legal counsel, Sarah, but I appreciate the thought. You're making this hard. The frustration in her voice was no longer concealed. We're only trying to look out for you. Everything's under control. The beach house isn't ready yet. I'll be in touch. Friday's call had a bite to it I hadn't encountered before. Gavin says you don't trust us. The line went dead before I could say a word. After each of those conversations, I returned to the desk and opened the log. Started Monday. Date, time, the substance of what was said, each demand and its underlying implication. Laid end to end, the record told a clear story. Gavin was drawing the noose tighter, deploying Clifford's daughter as his go-between, while lining up his lawyer brother as the next lever to pull. Saturday passed in silence from their end. I filled it at the shop appraisals customers, the ordinary rhythm of the antique trade, anything to hold the waiting at arm's length. Sunday crawled the same way each hour, inching toward the 2-week mark Remy had given me. Monday, Sarah rang again. The beach house, Dad, a week's gone by. A couple more days, I told her. There are things that need fixing. We're trying to go this weekend. I hear you, but I won't hand keys to a property I can't vouch for. A long silence followed, heavy with meaning. Fine, but Gavin's patience is running out. She cut the call. I logged at the specific mention of Gavin's impatience, the undisguised warning in her voice. I studied the running wrecker pressure manipulation, one turn of the screw after another. The net was closing in. But over on Broughton Street, Remy Duchamp was pulling at threads in Gavin Cresswell's past, and every day that went by moved Clifford a step closer to knowing what he was truly up against. 2 weeks, Remy had said. Clifford could last that long, had to. The antique carriage clock in Clifford's hands was German, circa 1910. Brass movement still pristine beneath the tarnished case. I was working through the spring inventory when the phone lit up. Remy Duchamp. 2 weeks since that first visit. 2 weeks of keeping the shop running, absorbing Sarah's escalating frustration, entering every pressure tactic into the log. I put the clock down and moved to the back office before picking up. Mr. Hargrove, preliminary findings are in. That low, deliberate urgency I'd come to recognize. We need to sit down. You've got something. More than one thing? Can you get to the office this afternoon? I glanced at the time, 2:30. Give me 30 minutes. I locked up, turned the sign, and wound through historic district traffic toward Broughton Street. Clifford's knuckles were white on the wheel. This call had been anticipated for 2 weeks, but now that it had arrived, the mix of dread and grim satisfaction was hard to separate. The staircase to Remy's office was familiar territory now. I took it quicker than the first time, shouldered through the door, marked L. Duchamp Private Investigations, without pausing to knock. Remy was at the desk, a manila folder squared up in front of the vacant chair, placed there deliberately waiting for me. I sat, took the folder with both hands, opened it measured and slow. Gavin Cresswell runs a pattern, Remy said, his voice stripped of inflection. 3 marriages, not one of them ended well. First document, marriage license dated 2007, then an annulment petition. I read through it, fraud, misrepresented finances, debts hidden before the ceremony. The second marriage went 3 years before divorce papers. Grounds, infidelity, financial malfeasance, emotional abuse. The third wife died. I raised Clifford's eyes. Official finding was accidental, Remy said, already reading the reaction. But the insurer spent 8 months contesting the claim before they finally paid out. Fraud, infidelity, death. I set the pages down with care. And Sarah was meant to be number 4. That's right, but there's still more. He pushed another document across, credit records, bank statements. Gavin was carrying $47,000 in debt, 2 credit companies, a string of collection agencies. His brother Dorian had been running interference through legal maneuvers, bankruptcy gambits, jurisdictional shuffles, creditor delays. I went through the figures, maxed lines, a long string of defaults and missed payments cascading through the years. Gavin dressed well, drove a leased Audi, carried himself like a man of means. Every bit of it was a performance funded by credit he had no intention of repaying. One more thing. Remy laid a photograph on the table. A woman on a sidewalk heading into an apartment building, dark hair somewhere in her 40s, arms full of grocery bags. Lena Voss, no relation. Gavin's been meeting her on a regular schedule. Tuesdays and Fridays, her place in town. Ongoing while he's been married to Clifford's daughter. While married to your daughter, Remy said again, letting it settle. 6 documented meetings over the past 2 weeks. He shows at 7 leaves around 10. Never varies. I placed the photograph beside the marriage records and the financial statements. The whole picture spread across the desk, like a blueprint for ruin. Clifford's read on the man had been right from the start, but what the evidence showed was uglier than anything imagined. Gavin wasn't merely calculating. He was a practiced predator, and Sarah was the current target. I need more photographs, I said. Him going in, coming out, the two of them together, clean, identifiable shots. Material that will hold up when it counts. Remy dipped his head slowly. That means sustained surveillance. Time, heavy, expensive. Minimum 3 weeks, could run to 4. I need to catch them together and document it thoroughly enough that there's no room for doubt. Clifford's checkbook was already out, pen uncapped. The cost doesn't matter. What matters is evidence that will stand in court. We're talking a significant block of additional hours. How much should I put on the check? He gave Clifford a number. I wrote it without a pause, tore it loose, and slid it across to join the folder and the photographs. Remy looked at the amount, then at Clifford's face. This kind of work takes time. He can't catch a hint that anyone's watching. That means I stay completely out of sight. Understood. Do it however it needs to be done. We shook on it. I took copies of the full file, the marriage records, the debt history, the surveillance notes, the photograph of Lena Voss at her building entrance. Proof that the man Clifford's daughter had married had done this before, was doing it right now, and wouldn't stop until someone made him. I walked out with the folder tucked under Clifford's arm. Sitting in the car 3 weeks felt like something Clifford could manage. That turned out to be wrong. A certified letter showed up before the week was out. I signed at the front door, read the return address, and knew before opening it. Dorian Cresswell, attorney at law. Clifford's chest went tight on the walk to the study. The letter confirmed everything anticipated and feared. Official letterhead. 3 dense pages of quasi-legal phrasing crafted to unsettle rather than to argue law. I read it through 3 times, marking the pressure points. Georgia forced heirship laws. Legitimate claim to family assets. Voluntary transfer recommended. Legal complications if disputed. Stripped to its core, the demand was this sign: the coastal beach house over to Sarah as a wedding gift, willingly, or face legal proceedings that would damage family bonds and cost everyone involved. Dorian had dressed a bluff in expensive language and mailed it, hoping it would land like a verdict. I reached for the phone and dialed Calvin Price. Calvin had managed Clifford's legal affairs for 15 years, contracts, deeds, corporate filings. His paralegal answered, "Mr. Price is in with a client. Shall I have him call you back? Tell him it's Clifford Hargrove and it won't keep. He'll reach you within the hour." I used that hour marking up Dorian's letter in the margins. Every threat, every implication, every place the language reached beyond what the law actually permitted. By the time Calvin rang back, the whole document was mapped. Clifford talked to me. Concern in his voice from the first word. "Calvin, I need a reading on something. I've got a letter claiming rights under Georgia inheritance law." "What kind of rights?" I read the key sections out loud. The quiet on his end deepened as I went. "Who signed this?" he asked at last. "Dorian Cresswell." A beat. "I know that name. This is a performance, Clifford. It's not law." "Walk me through it." "Forced heirship only applies after death. You're alive. You own the property outright. This letter carries no legal weight at all." The relief was real, and it burned out fast, replaced by something harder and colder. Dorian had known exactly what the law said. So had Gavin. The whole exercise had been a bet on Clifford's ignorance, a gamble that official-looking paper would be enough to make him fold. So I disregard it. You respond to it. I'll put together a reply that makes clear Clifford knows the law and isn't moving. Calvin paused. "But here's the thing. If they're already circling the estate, you need to restructure. When did you last update the will? 8 years ago. Here's what I'd do. Put the beach house in a trust. Take it out of the estate entirely. Revise the will to wall off the other assets. It's not inexpensive, somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000, probably a month's work. But when it's done, nothing is reachable. I unlocked the cabinet and pulled Clifford's estate planning files, spreading them open next to Dorian's letter. Attack and defense at the same time. Do all of it, I said. No hesitation. When can you begin? I'll have the paralegal pull your existing documents before the end of today. A pause. Clifford, what is actually happening here? What's coming next is where the pressure truly begins, where the lines between protecting someone you love and losing them to the very person you're trying to expose become razor thin. Before we get there, let me ask you something. If you suspected someone close to your family was working against you in secret, would you confront them directly or stay quiet and build your case first? I picked each word with deliberate care. Clifford's son-in-law is not the man Clifford's daughter believes him to be. Steps are being taken to protect what's been built. Understood. I'll get to work right away. Expect a draft for your review by next week. After the call ended, I sat at the desk, Dorian's letter on one side, the estate files on the other, Remy's manila folder locked in the drawer. The fight was now on more than one front, gathering evidence against Gavin, while simultaneously reinforcing the legal walls around everything Clifford owned. I opened the pressure log and made a new entry date time, the specific demands from Dorian's letter, and how they'd been answered through Calvin. The record grew thicker with each passing week, a precise chronology of Gavin's escalating campaign. 3 weeks until Remy had photographs. 4 weeks until Calvin finished the trust restructuring. Clifford needed to hold position until both pieces landed. Clifford's phone buzzed, Sarah's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, waited, then played the message. Dad, Dorian says you got his letter. This doesn't have to be so difficult. Just sign over the beach house and we can put all this tension behind us. Gavin and I want a real relationship with you, but you're making that impossible. There was frustration in her voice, but underneath it something else. Uncertainty. Maybe confusion. She didn't know what was really happening because Gavin hadn't been honest with her about anything. I saved the voicemail and added a note to the log. Evidence was accumulating in layers: legal threats, pressure calls, manipulation runs. When the moment came, every piece of it would be needed. The waiting continued. Calvin worked on the trust. Remy assembled the photographic record. Gavin and Sarah pressed their demands with growing urgency, unaware that a case was being built that would bring the whole structure down around them. Clifford just had to hold a little longer. I was working through quarterly tax documents at the desk when the phone rang. Remy Duchamp. 3 weeks since the surveillance had been authorized. 3 weeks of ordinary routine, while Gavin and Sarah turned up the pressure. Mr. Hargrove, the complete package is ready. Professional satisfaction in his voice. 47 photographs, audio transcripts, everything documented. When can you come in? This afternoon? An hour later, I was in Remy's office watching him lay photograph after photograph across the desk. Gavin and Lena at a restaurant in Savannah, hands intertwined across the table. Gavin entering her building, timestamp, reading 7:15 p.m. Gavin and Lena embracing on her balcony, the intimacy plain to see. Gavin's car in her lot, photographed at midnight and again before dawn. 3 weeks of surveillance. Remy said, sorting the images by date. 47 usable photographs. His schedule never wavers. Tuesdays and Fridays, same address every time. I went through each image carefully. These are clear, no room for interpretation. None. Remy set a small digital recorder on the desk and pressed play. A woman's voice, casual, caught from outside an apartment door. Once he gets the inheritance sorted, we won't have to hide anymore. He promised me we could finally be together. I looked up. She's in on it. She knows he married for the money. She's part of the plan, Remy confirmed. He slid another folder across. Court records from the earlier marriages, certified copies. The pattern is the same every time. Whirlwind courtship, marriage, financial access. Then either divorce or an insurance claim. I opened the folder and went through the documents. 3 marriages before Sarah, each one a calculated operation from start to finish. The evidence was comprehensive, methodical, impossible to dispute. After a long silence, I asked, "What's the final bill?" Total package $6,800. Covers everything: photographs, transcripts, certified document copies. The final report. I wrote the check without a moment's hesitation, tore it from the book, pushed it across the desk. Remy handed over the complete dossier in a leather document case: photographs, recordings, financial records, court documents, the full arsenal. I carried it to the car as carefully as if it were breakable, settled it in the passenger seat. That night in the study, I spread the photographs under the desk lamp's focused beam, each image locked in a piece of the story, Gavin's double life captured across 47 moments of cold-blooded betrayal. I sorted out the most damaging ones: Gavin and Lena together, outside a restaurant. Gavin leaving her building at dawn, their fingers laced together at a coffee shop. Then, I organized the supporting documents around them: marriage records bearing official court seals, financial statements mapping the debt, the audio transcript where Lena had mentioned the inheritance. The next morning, I called Sarah. "The beach house is ready," I said, keeping Clifford's voice neutral. "You and Gavin can head out whenever you like." Her surprise was immediate. "Really, Dad? That's wonderful. We could come today. I'll make sure everything's set. Keys will be on the kitchen counter as usual." "Thank you. Things have been so strained. Maybe this is a fresh start." "Maybe it is," I said carefully. I hung up and sat looking at the dossier. Then I took the leather case and drove to Tybee Island. The beach house sat quiet on its stretch of coast, the water visible through the windows. I let myself in and went directly to the kitchen. The table was wide solid wood, and in the morning, the sunlight would fall straight across it. I wiped down the surface and began arranging everything with precision. The photographs went down first, the central images showing Gavin and Lena in unmistakable intimacy. The supporting documents fanned out around them: court records with their official seals, financial statements, the audio transcript summary. Last, I placed Clifford's handwritten note in the center, set on top of the clearest photograph of Gavin embracing Lena outside her apartment building. The note was simple. "Sarah, I'm sorry you have to learn the truth this way, but you need to know who you're living with. Your father." I stepped back and took in the arrangement. Morning light would strike the table directly. She'd come to the kitchen first thing everyone did and see it all at once. No way to miss it. No way to misunderstand. I locked up and drove back to Savannah. The trap was set. Now there was nothing to do but wait for it to spring. Sarah's text came Friday evening. "At the beach house, it's perfect," followed by a heart. I stared at the screen without responding. Nothing to say yet. She hadn't gone to the kitchen. Saturday passed in agonizing silence. I tried to work at the shop, but kept reaching for the phone, playing out scenarios. Had she found the photographs? Was she confronting Gavin? Crying walking out? The not knowing was worse than anything that had been anticipated. I closed up early, drove home, and paced the study. Clifford's chest felt tight, though I couldn't tell whether it was the angina or plain anxiety. I took a nitroglycerin tablet as a precaution, sat at the desk, stared at the phone. By Saturday evening, it was unbearable. I picked up the phone 3 times before actually dialing. 4 rings, 5, voicemail. "Honey, how's the getaway?" Clifford's voice carefully level. "Just checking in. Call when you can." Sunday brought more silence. Saturday night had barely allowed any sleep lying awake, turning over every possible version of what might be happening. By Sunday afternoon, I was close to getting in the car and driving out there when the phone finally rang. Sarah's voice was unsteady. "Dad, I found what you left on the table." I gripped the phone tighter. "I need time to think, to process." A long pause, just breathing, and what sounded like crying held back by effort. "I can't talk right now. I'm here when you're ready. I have to go." She was gone. I sat at the desk phone in Clifford's hand, forcing myself not to call back. She'd seen the evidence. She was working through it. Every instinct screamed to get in the car and go to her. I made myself sit still. Monday morning, the phone rang at 9:15. Sarah's name. I answered before the second ring. Her voice arrived in pieces, words breaking through between sobs. "I saw the photographs Saturday morning. I went to the kitchen to make coffee, and there they were across the table. All those pictures of Gavin with that woman." A breath. "I didn't believe it at first. I thought you'd somehow, I don't know, made them up." I stayed quiet and let her talk. "I showed them to Gavin. He lost it, Dad. Screamed that you manufactured the whole thing, that you're trying to tear us apart because you're bitter and alone. He said you hired actors, fabricated everything. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to so badly." "What changed?" I asked, keeping Clifford's voice gentle. "Saturday night he fell asleep. I couldn't. I kept going back to those pictures. So I looked at the documents again, court records from his other marriages, dates women's names I'd never heard of, official seals. You can't fake those. Can you?" No, you can't. And that transcript, her voice broke, where the woman talks about after the inheritance and finally being together once he gets what's coming to him. That's me, isn't it? I'm the inheritance he was waiting for. Yes. A long silence filled with crying. Sunday morning, I told him I wanted a divorce. He tried to talk his way out of it. At first said, I was being manipulated by you. Then he got angry, started yelling. Then he threatened me. Said I'd regret this, that his brother would make sure I lost everything. Then he packed up and walked out. That was an hour ago. I closed my eyes and ran through each scene again. How are you? How could I not have seen it? Her voice was thin, unmoored. Why didn't I see him for what he was? Because you wanted to believe in something beautiful, I told her carefully. That's not weakness, Sarah. That's hope. Silence stretched, then came a small voice. Can you come get me? I don't want to stay here alone. I was already reaching for my keys. I'm on my way right now. The drive to Tybee Island took 25 minutes. I found Sarah on the beach house's front porch, still wearing what she'd had on since Saturday, a folder resting across her lap, holding some of the evidence. She looked up as I turned into the driveway, and the expression on her face, devastation, threaded through with relief, cracked something I'd held tightly in check for weeks. I stepped out and climbed the porch steps. She rose, the folder sliding off her lap, papers fanning out across the boards. Neither of us moved to gather them. I'm sorry, she said, tears running freely down her face. I'm so sorry I didn't listen. I brought her into my arms, feeling her tremble against my shoulder. You're safe now. That's all that matters. We stood like that for several minutes, father and daughter, while proof of Gavin Cresswell's betrayal drifted in the coastal breeze around our feet. The trap had done its work. The truth had surfaced. But standing there, holding Lena's broken heart in my hands, I felt no sense of triumph, only the grim weight of what I'd been forced to do. Back at the mansion, Sarah sat across from me in the study, occupying the same chair where Gavin had sat months before, casually probing about the beach house with counterfeit ease. Now she held the evidence folder in her lap, photographs visible through the half-open flap, her face hollowed by exhaustion and a shame so deep it seemed to add years to her. At the wedding, she said, her voice barely reaching me, tears sliding down her cheeks. I told you to leave. I said Gavin didn't want you there. I chose him over you in front of everyone who knows us, your friends, your colleagues, people who've watched me grow up. I laid my hand over hers, feeling how cold she was, despite the June warmth. I let the quiet hold for a moment before I chose my words. You didn't know what he was. Her voice gave out entirely. The way you looked at him at dinner, the questions you asked about his work and his family. I noticed, Dad. I saw your concern and dismissed every signal because I was convinced you were just being overprotective. I accused you of not wanting me to be happy. Because you wanted to believe in something beautiful, I said, carefully pressing her hand. That's human nature. That's not a failure, Sarah. That's hope. And hope isn't weakness. I'm so sorry, Dad. It came out as a sob. I'm so incredibly sorry. You're home now. We'll fix this together. That's what matters. She stayed in the mansion, after that sleeping in her old bedroom, the one she'd vacated when Gavin moved in. Some nights I heard her crying muffled sounds through the walls that coiled my chest tight with anger at what Gavin had put her through. The next 3 days brought his phone calls first to Sarah's phone, which she'd given me permission to screen. I sat at my desk, logging each voicemail in the pressure file, watching his approach shift in real time, from charm to manipulation to barely veiled threats. First message, Monday morning, apologetic and bewildered. Sarah, baby, this is insane. Your dad twisted everything around. Those photos, I can explain every single one. It's not what it looks like. Call me, please. I love you. Second message, Tuesday afternoon, accusatory and calculated. Sarah, you're making a serious mistake. Your father is pulling your strings. He's been against us from the start. He can't stand being alone, so he can't stand watching us be happy. Don't let him tear down what we built. Third message, Wednesday evening, threatening. Fine, don't call me back, but you'll both regret it. My lawyer says we have options. Dorian says there are ways to make this very costly for you. I saved every message, added timestamps and summaries to the log, assembling a harassment record in case we needed it. Dorian's letters followed, delivered by courier in heavy manila envelopes, stamped with his firm's seal. Demands for compensation for emotional distress. Claims of harm to Gavin's reputation and professional standing. threats of legal action for defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I filed each one in a folder marked Void Legal Threats and sent no reply. Calvin Price handled all correspondence, responding with crisp precision that the claims carried no legal merit and that further harassment would invite counterclaims. Mid-June, Calvin called with news that lifted a burden I'd been shouldering for months. I was in the study going over quarterly reports from the shop when his name lit up the phone. "The trust is complete," he said, skipping any greeting. "The beach house is out of your estate entirely. The new will is signed, witnessed, and filed. You're legally bulletproof. Nothing Gavin or Dorian try can touch your assets now." If he'd gotten access before any of this, I said though I already knew the answer, he'd have found the barn empty. Everything you hold is protected through the trust structure. It would take years of litigation just to mount a challenge, and they would lose. A pause. "How's Sarah holding up? Better than expected. She's filing for divorce next week. She has everything she needs." "Good. Georgia courts don't look kindly on fraud, especially marital fraud. With documentation like this, it'll be clean. Unpleasant, but clean." Sarah met with Petra Calloway the following Monday, a divorce attorney Calvin had recommended. Sharp mid-40s with a reputation for hard-nosed representation in fraud cases. I sat beside Sarah in Petra's downtown office as she worked through Remy's evidence package, watching her expression move from professional interest to something close to righteous indignation. 47 photographs, spanning 3 weeks. Petra said, spreading selected images across her desk. Audio recordings where his mistress explicitly mentions waiting for the inheritance. 3 prior marriages with documented patterns of fraud and financial manipulation. $47,000 in concealed debt. She looked up at Sarah with fierce sympathy. "This man is a career predator with a refined technique. You're victim number 4 that we know of. Can he claim anything?" Sarah's voice was small, fragile. "The house, my father's property, anything from the marriage. You were married less than 3 months. Everything is premarital property. Georgia law is unambiguous on that. And with this evidence of fraudulent intent, the recordings, the pattern, the hidden debts. He walks away with nothing but what he brought in. His debts and his lies. He'll fight," though Sarah said. "He'll make this ugly. Let him try." Petra's smile was cool and professional. "We have a case that argues itself. The moment a judge sees these photographs, it's finished. I've handled hundreds of divorces. This is the most thoroughly documented case of marital fraud I have ever seen." The divorce papers were filed in late June. I was in the study working through inventory spreadsheets when I heard a car stop outside. Through the window, I watched Gavin step from a vehicle I didn't recognize, probably borrowed since the Audi had been repossessed by the leasing company. He'd come back for belongings he'd left behind. The process server, a young woman carrying a clipboard, met him on the walkway. I watched Gavin's face as he took the envelope and signed the receipt. His expression passed from confusion to shock, white as paper, then flooded with rage red, climbing his cheeks and throat. He turned toward the house, and for a moment our eyes locked through the glass. I didn't move back. I held his gaze until he was the one who looked away, crushing the envelope in his fist. July brought Gavin's counterattack through his attorney, not Dorian, who couldn't represent him in divorce proceedings due to conflict of interest. The settlement demand arrived by certified mail on a Tuesday morning, requests for property division, alimony compensation for emotional investment in the relationship, and professional opportunities he claimed to have sacrificed during the marriage. It was fantasy desperation dressed up as legal strategy. Petra responded by sending the complete evidence package to Gavin's attorney. Every photograph, every recording, the certified court records from his previous marriages, the financial documents showing his concealed debts, and the affair that had run throughout the marriage. The settlement demand vanished quietly after that. No reply, no further contact, no revised proposals. Gavin's attorney had seen what he was being asked to defend and wanted no part of it. Professional ethics aside, it was an unwinnable case. Late July, the court date notice arrived. August 15th, 10 o'clock, Chatham County Courthouse, final divorce hearing. I set the notice on my desk and held my eyes on it for a long moment. 4.5 months since the wedding. 4.5 months of investigation, evidence gathering, legal maneuvering, and patient documentation. The end was drawing close. Justice, not revenge. Protection, not destruction. Hurting Gavin had never been the point. I'd simply wanted him gone from my daughter's life, unable to claim what he'd never deserved, stripped of his mask and prevented from running the same play on some other woman. The weeks leading up to the hearing settled into careful routine. Sarah stayed close, mending slowly, gradually reclaiming the person she'd been before Gavin Cresswell stepped into her world. We shared dinners again, quiet evenings where neither of us brought up the divorce or Gavin, just ordinary talk about her work at the gallery and my shop. Gavin's calls dried up after his lawyer went through our evidence. Dorian's threatening letters stopped cold after Calvin's final warning about harassment litigation. The house breathed again. The suffocating tension that had taken up residence since December lifted at last, dissolving the way morning fog burns off under a rising sun. August arrived with Georgia's full summer heat and the court date closing in. The night before the hearing, I pressed my suit with painstaking care, set out my tie, buffed my shoes to a shine. Everything I did, I'd approached with that same methodical preparation. This was no different. Tomorrow, the legal system would deliver what months of careful work had been building toward official confirmation that Gavin Cresswell had committed fraud, official termination of his claim on my daughter, and official protection for Sarah going forward. I stood in my study, eyes resting on the walnut box that held the antique watch, the one that had never reached Sarah on her wedding day. After tomorrow's hearing, I would give it to her properly, not as a wedding gift anymore, but as something better, a symbol of restoration. Time given back, a future reclaimed. The hallways of the Chatham County Courthouse held a cool quiet, despite the August heat pressing against the windows outside. Morning light slanted through tall panes, throwing geometric shadows across marble floors, worn glassy by generations of footsteps. Sarah sat beside me on a wooden bench, hands folded tight in her lap, knuckles drained white. I rested my hand on her shoulder and felt the rigid tension coiled in her muscles. "You all right?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She nodded, but what came out of her mouth told a different story. "I just want this finished. I want him out of my life officially, legally, permanently. It'll be soon." People move past us in a steady current, lawyers carrying briefcases, families huddled together, speaking in hushed voices. Court officers scanning dockets, the machinery of justice turning forward with its unhurried bureaucratic certainty. Petra Calloway appeared composed in a navy suit that radiated professional authority, a leather briefcase in hand that I knew held copies of everything, the photographs, the recordings, the certified court documents. "They're here," she said, settling beside Sarah. "Gavin and his attorney just checked in downstairs. Remember, this is largely procedural at this point. The evidence does the talking. If the judge addresses you directly, answer truthfully, but I expect this to move quickly." Gavin appeared at the far end of the hallway alongside a man in an ill-fitting suit, his attorney someone I'd never seen before. Gavin himself looked diminished. The months had taken something from him, physically thinner, older, the easy swagger and polished confidence that had once followed him everywhere, simply gone. His eyes found mine across the 40 feet of hallway. I held the look, no gloating, no visible satisfaction, just the quiet certainty that what was coming was already decided. He looked away first. At 9:55, our docket was called. We filed into the courtroom, traditional wood-paneled, the seal of Georgia displayed prominently behind the judge's bench. We took our places at the separate tables, Gavin and his attorney on one side, Sarah, Petra, and me on the other. The judge entered. She was a woman in her 60s, iron-gray hair pulled back, severely sharp eyes set behind reading glasses, and an expression that made clear she had witnessed every permutation of human dishonesty the courts had to offer, and was not remotely impressed by any of it. The nameplate read, Judge Adele Burchard. She settled into her chair, opened the file, and read with unhurried attention. The courtroom held near total silence, broken only by the quiet turning of pages and the distant hum of the building's ventilation. The hearing lasted 30 minutes that managed to feel both endless and instantaneous at once. Judge Burchard examined the photographs one by one, reading portions of the audio transcript aloud in a flat clinical tone. She reviewed the certified court records from Gavin's previous marriages with visible precision, taking notes on a legal pad. "Counsel," she said, turning her gaze to Gavin's attorney, "does your client contest the authenticity of these photographs, showing him with Ms. Lena Voss on multiple dates throughout his marriage to the petitioner?" Gavin's attorney rose. "Your Honor, The relationship between Mr. Cresswell and Miss Voss is complicated, but— Counsel. The judge's voice dropped to something close to ice. I asked a simple question. Do you contest the authenticity of these photographs, yes or no? A pause. Gavin leaned forward and whispered something urgent to his attorney. The man straightened. No, Your Honor. We do not contest their authenticity. Did Mr. Cresswell disclose his previous marriages to Ms. Hargrove before their wedding? Silence from the other table. Did he disclose financial debts totaling $47,000? More silence. Did he inform her that he was maintaining a relationship with another woman throughout their courtship and marriage? Gavin's attorney cleared his throat. Your Honor, my client's personal— Answer the question, counsel. No, Your Honor. Judge Burgard set the documents down, removed her reading glasses, and looked directly at Gavin with undisguised contempt. The evidence before this court establishes a clear, calculated pattern of fraudulent intent. Mr. Cresswell concealed 3 previous marriages, 2 ending in divorce, 1 under circumstances suspicious enough to warrant extensive investigation. He concealed significant financial debts. He maintained an extramarital relationship throughout his courtship and marriage to Ms. Hargrove, and the audio evidence indicates he viewed this marriage as a vehicle for accessing family assets with his mistress, explicitly referencing inheritance as their shared future goal. She paused, letting that weight settle over the room. The petitioner's father supplied substantial documentation of the respondent's calculated deception. This court finds that Mr. Cresswell entered this marriage under fraudulent pretenses with intent to access and claim family assets to which he had no legitimate right. Gavin's attorney made one final attempt, desperation threading into his voice. Your Honor, my client's relational difficulties do not erase his emotional investment in this marriage. He suffered genuine reputational harm and emotional distress. Relationship difficulties. The judge's voice could have frosted glass. Counsel, these photographs document systematic, premeditated adultery spanning the entire marriage. These recordings reference inheritance, explicitly demonstrating financial motivation. This was not a marriage built on genuine feeling that ran into trouble. This was a scheme carefully executed with a documented pattern of identical conduct toward previous wives. She reached for her gavel, and beneath the table, I felt Sarah's hand close around mine, gripping hard. Divorce granted. No property division, no alimony, no basis for any financial award to the respondent. This court finds that Mr. Cresswell is entitled to nothing from this dissolved union beyond the debts and consequences he arrived with. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that rang through the courtroom. Final. Done. Over. Sarah's grip on my hand eased. I heard her exhale a sound like releasing a breath she'd been holding for months. We rose as the judge exited. Gavin sat motionless, staring at the table in front of him, while his attorney packed papers with mechanical efficiency, already moving on to whatever came next. This lost cause already behind him. Outside, Sarah and I descended the wide stone steps into August sunlight that felt cleansing after the cool institutional air inside. We'd nearly reached the sidewalk when Gavin's voice brought us to a stop. This isn't over. I turned. He stood on the steps above us, face drawn tight, with barely contained fury, fists clenched at his sides. You think you've won? His voice climbed. I'll make sure everyone knows what you did, old man. How you manipulated her, turned her against me, fabricated evidence. I turned to face him, fully unhurried, unmoved by the performance. Everyone already knows Gavin. The court knows. Your creditors know. Your girlfriend knows. It's over. Walk away while you still can. You destroyed my life. He shouted loud enough that people on the sidewalk turned to look. The truth came out, calm and clear. No, you destroyed your own life, Gavin. You did that with every lie you told, every wife you defrauded, every debt you buried. I just made certain you didn't destroy my daughter's life along with the rest. Sarah stepped in closer to me, her voice steady. We're done here. Don't contact me again. The restraining order is already drawn up if you do. We walked to the car, leaving Gavin on the courthouse steps diminished and defeated, shouting something neither of us stopped to hear. The weeks that followed brought news that felt like epilogue, like watching dominoes fall that had been tipped months ago. Calvin forwarded a notice Gavin had filed, Chapter 13 bankruptcy. His creditors, learning the divorce settlement, left him empty-handed with no prospect of reaching family money, had accelerated their collection efforts. The leased Audi was repossessed. The expensive wardrobe, the carefully constructed illusion of success, all of it liquidated or reclaimed. Sarah heard through social channels, gallery connections, who knew that Lena's relationship with Gavin had ended abruptly. Lena Voss had vanished from his life as swiftly as she'd appeared in it. Once it became clear there was no inheritance coming, no shared future to speak of, nothing waiting but Gavin's debts, his lies, and his rage, she was gone. Dorian's threatening letters stopped entirely after Calvin sent one final communication, making clear that any further harassment would result in legal action for abuse of process. The Cresswell brothers went quiet, retreating into whatever lives they'd constructed on manipulation and legal intimidation. I found that Gavin barely crossed my mind anymore. He'd become irrelevant, a problem resolved, a threat diffused. Late August, I sat in my study with the official divorce decree and read it one last time before putting it away for good. The legal language was dry and bureaucratic, but its effect was absolute. Sarah Hargrove, divorced free, restored to the life she'd had before Gavin Cresswell. Sarah came in quietly, moving through the study, with the ease of someone fully at home. She settled into the chair across from my desk, the same chair where all of this had begun back in March, when I'd first felt that instinctive unease about Gavin's questions. "The bankruptcy notice came today," she said. "His creditors took everything, the car, his furniture, whatever he had in storage. They're garnishing wages from whatever job he managed to land. That's not our concern anymore." "Lena left too," I heard through the gallery network. She paused. "Doesn't matter. He's alone now, facing everything he built on lies." I felt no satisfaction hearing that. Just a quiet recognition of natural consequences. That's what happens when you lay a foundation out of deception. Sooner or later, it gives way, and there's nothing solid underneath to keep you standing. Tears filled her eyes. Not for Gavin. Relief, release, gratitude. "Dad, thank you. You saved me from spending years, maybe decades, with him. If you hadn't investigated, if you hadn't been patient enough to build the evidence, if you hadn't left it all at the beach house where I couldn't look past it, I'll always protect you," I said simply. "Always have, always will. That's not negotiable. I know that now. I should have known it then. Should have trusted your instincts." I smiled, a genuine one, the first in months. "Now we both know what we're capable of when we have to be. You're stronger than you think, Sarah. You confronted him. You ended it. You walked away. That took courage." She rose, came around the desk, and pulled me into an embrace. I held my daughter and felt the full weight of the past months finally lift from my shoulders. Justice had been served. Not revenge for its own sake, but protection. Not destruction, but exposure. Not cruelty, but truth. When she stepped back, I reached into my desk drawer and brought out the walnut box, holding the antique watch. "This was meant to be your wedding gift," I said, lifting the lid. The Swiss pocket watch caught the afternoon light, its brass movement visible through the crystal face, the scroll work glinting in the sun. "It never reached your hands that day, but it's still yours. It always was." She took it carefully, tears running freely down her face. "It's beautiful. The craftsmanship, Dad, this must have cost." $12,000, I said. "Worth every penny to see you holding it now, instead of him claiming it as marital property." She laughed through her tears, and the sound filled the study with something that had been absent for months. Joy. That evening I poured 2 glasses of wine, something I hadn't done since before the wedding, since before Gavin had walked into our lives carrying his calculated charm. We sat together in my study, father and daughter restored and whole. Outside, the Savannah summer held onto its heat, cicadas singing their evening chorus. But inside, everything was finally cool and calm and right. "To new beginnings," Sarah said, lifting her glass. "And to truth," I replied. We drank, and I felt something I hadn't felt since March. Peace. I had protected what mattered most. That's where this story comes to rest. Not on anger, not on triumph. On a quiet evening, 2 glasses of wine, and a daughter who finally knew how much she was worth fighting for. This road cost something. Months of patience when every instinct screamed to move faster. The pain of watching Sarah walk toward a man I knew would hurt her, and holding back just long enough to let the truth do what accusations never could. I believe God has a way of timing justice, not the way we'd choose, not as fast as we'd like, but exactly when it will stick. The foundation Gavin built on deception eventually gave way the way it always does. Here is what this family revenge story taught me, and what I'd want you to carry with you. When something feels wrong about the person your child loves, trust that feeling and then go find the proof. Never move on anger alone. Patience is not weakness. It is the sharpest tool a father owns. Protect quietly. The moment you show your hand before the evidence is complete, you give the predator time to run. If someone walks into your family treating loyalty like a resource to be mined, let the truth expose them, not your temper. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment and tell me what stayed with you. Share it with someone who might need to hear it, a parent, a friend, anyone who has ever had to fight for someone they love without being thanked for it. And if you haven't already subscribed to Dad's Revenge, so you're here for the next story. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next one.